my sound is slightly better this time. Um, I just wanted to record maybe some final thoughts. I mean, not final, obviously, for many reasons. Um, so again, the game I'm talking about here is Tainted Grail, the tabletop RPG, the solo version called Journey in Avalon. Um, yeah, as a summary, if anybody's coming to this video fresh, I played through what are called three songs of this game. A song is sort of a cycle where you visit an area in the world. Let me pull up the world map. So my first song was here in Area 24, which is Songs of South. Landed here, went up through this direction, went here into the Grubwood. That was my second song, and then my third song was here in Area 31, which is like this Seahurn of Edhurin. It's a kingdom of Edhurin, basically, um, or the whatever the fief. Um, yeah, so I played three songs. Each song will have a number of challenges, encounters in them, um, from conflict to intrigue to um, exploration. And so a song is you basically go through a number of challenges in an area, flipping over cards. Each area has its own particular um, arrangement of cards, and then once you complete it, you move on to the next area. And that continues as you kind of progress through the game with your RPG character, uh, getting, doing all your XP, leveling up skills, getting equipment, uh, moving through these three acts of the story, a narrative arc, and each time you move up an act, things get harder, but you get some extra abilities, things like that. And you're basically just telling stories as you go. The events that are coming up are uh, unique to, generally speaking, they're unique to the area. So, for example, here in the scenery of Edhurin, you're going to have different distributions of exploration, intrigue, and confrontation challenges, and then you're going to have custom events based on the cards that come up for that region: exploration, intrigue, challenge, confrontation. Sometimes areas will not even have some of these events. Face cards have sort of unique events that are consistent across any of the areas, but those are all affected by the weirdness level of a particular area. The area itself will have a certain weirdness level, 0 to 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 4. You get random weirdness events every time you come in that kind of affect the entire scene and also affect the events that come out. You also have combat. If face card comes out during conflict, you'll have some combat that is done through a pretty simple system of just taking your attack, drawing from this D10 deck of cards, um, and adding that on and comparing with the defense of the enemy, and vice versa. So that's kind of a very high level summary of the game. Um, what are my thoughts on it? So I wanted to preface by saying that I've tried playing solo RPGs a number of different times. I've tried Ironsworn, I've tried Notorious, I've tried a few of Alex T's from Black Oath Entertainment's games like Broken Shores, maybe a couple others, a sort of solo RPG adjacent game from Ivan Sorensen, Nordic Weasel, which is 5 Leagues from the Borderlands. I've tried all these with varying levels of success. Personally speaking, and I'm also familiar with like the Mythic GM emulator and solo modes for games like Forbidden Lands, for example. And my general problem with solo role playing is that it's too, I wouldn't say open ended, but I would say the world is not defined. I have a long history with tabletop role playing, and when playing Dungeons and Dragons, when playing Blades in the Dark and other systems, it's my opinion that the player should be focused on playing. They should be focused on their character and role playing who their character is in this world, what their character's doing, what decisions they're making, what are their motivations, how are they responding to what's happening. That's like the essence of playing uh, a tabletop role-playing game. And in most, starting with the Mythic G emulator, and moving on to things like Ironsworn, in my opinion, for me, too much onus is put on the person doing the solo role playing to not just help facilitate the role of the GM, but they are literally often creating the world. They're having to think up what happens next, and what does it mean that this thing happens, and does the guard have does he have his back turned to me? And there's just so much energy put into trying to determine what is happening in the world, that for me it distracts from role playing as my character in that world. And so you either get like really open ended sort of what I call self-journaling or self-authoring RPGs like Ironsworn, or even more extreme is like Thousand Year Vampire, where you're basically just reacting off of prompts and trying to make up what happens next in the story. It can veer a little bit too much toward creative writing, but and some people will say, well, you don't have to write. That's fine. You're still having to narrate for yourself and uh, basically come up with the story whole hog just based off of prompts. So I usually tend toward the more structured stuff, like the LXT Blackwood Entertainment stuff, like Five Leagues from the Borderlands. But the issue I have with those is they can sort of lose the narrative thread. You don't, because they're so structured and you're sort of reacting to specific events off of tables, and okay, I got 5 gold because a merchant stopped by or whatever. You sort of lose that flavor of storytelling. So it's a gentle thread to walk, and I think most solo RPGs, if you look at most solo RPG systems like Forbidden Lands and things like that, they veered more toward what the general concept of oracles, like yes no oracles or prompt based oracles, things like that, which again veer for me too far toward having to come up what's happening in the story, sorry, in the world. So one thing that brings me to my thoughts about the Tainted Grail solo role playing, which is I was struck from the start by how much structure there is. You are, at least for me, I'm never left with a moment of like, what is going on? What happens next? What am I supposed to be doing? It is very structured. When you start the game and you choose a character, it tells you, all this information about your character. It tells you background about them. It tells you where they're from. But not only that, it tells you where they start in the world. There's an opinionated world. Um, this whole world is pre-thought out, and Maeve starts down here in 24, and it says set up the cards this way, and then move in this way, and then roll for how many challenges there are, and now choose which challenges you want to do, and in what order. And then, okay, you've encountered an intrigue challenge. Now go, you're in this place. Go look up the table in that area and figure out what happened. That's all very structured, and it allows me to focus more on the playing of the game as my character. Now, where it starts to drift away from like Alex T in those situations is that it's very clear that these are narrative prompts. So that's where it starts to get a little bit more out of my comfort zone, but I actually was totally okay with it. You get these narrative prompts, and it's like, you know, I got one when I was going through here where, let's see, which one did I get in this area? Um, there was one around like, yeah, now a once clear stream now whispers unintelligible words, and there's a modifier on it. You get an actual event that occurred and somewhat of the details of that event. And then what's really genius is you could say, okay, well, what do I do with that? Like, it's just words, it's just an event. Then I'm back to solo journaling. Well, no, it says very clearly, go choose what skill you would use to interact with or overcome this. So that for me provided a really great kernel for really concrete storytelling. I could be like, okay, one of the ones I had was like a minstrel. I ran into a minstrel that had like information about the capital, and he was being attacked. So I could decide how my character would interact with that in a really concrete way, not just narratively, but what skill would Maeve use to interact with that situation. So I can think first about my character's motivations, And I chose that she would defend the minstrel, so I did combat. In other situations, I was trying to decide how to, sway somebody, so it's using communication or inspiration, or it, it gives you enough of a situation for you to think situation plus my character and their inherent motivations and how I'm playing them. How would they respond to this situation, and then what skill would they use? And for me, that made things really concrete. So those were all really big pros of the game. I mean, it has like the kernels of a lot of tabletop role-playing systems. I really like that stuff. You basically have a really simplified character sheet. Um, you have the various like attribute stats and skills, as I mentioned, inventory. So it's a lot more structured than a lot of these other games as well. The world is very opinionated. Tainted Grail as itself, I have history playing the game, so I have some context for what is the weirdness, what are these areas. Um, that's all positive. I really like this concept of the tarot cards, which means that you can either use a generic deck like I did, or when the campaign comes out, you have a custom deck. But it means that it's like a very compact game. You really just have the book and the tarot cards. There's maybe some extra tchotchkes with the campaign, but it creates like a table presence here. But it allows them to represent all these different environments without having like a huge book um, of detailed maps, etc. So those are all, I mean, in the end, I had a really good time. I had a cool story that I told. I definitely am looking forward to getting the the components from the Kickstarter to really like lean in. I think there's like a pawn board. There's some quests that are supposed to come with the campaign. So what are my cons? For me, my cons would largely be, I think I mentioned some of them in earlier videos. And some of these sound like they're intentional design decisions by the creator. But for example, I don't feel like the events that occur on the tables are definitely thematic for the area, but I don't necessarily feel like I'm in that area based on what's happening mechanically. So for example, I was just looking at this map and I'm like, I see something there. I want to visit that town, right? That seems reasonable. I want to come here and visit that. Well, it turns out it's just like a feature on the map. I mean, there's a space here. It's really like thematically, it's a fortress, but there's no content to explore around that. Like maybe some of the random events might mention the fortress, but if I'm like, I want to go to that fortress, this is a part of this world, I have to make it up. And I'm back into like, okay, what is this fortress? Like, what's in there? That's not why I'm playing the game. I'm more want to talk about how my character responds to certain situations. But so there's a little bit of a lack of structured content to find in the game. There's such a big map here. Like I would really love to say like, what am I going to discover over here? The prompts are nice. They give a flavor of that what that area is, but maybe I would prefer a little bit of like, you can discover a thing that, I mean, it's as simple as just like have a card that um, goes to some custom narration in that area. That has maybe some custom mechanics, just a page or two. You land, you find the fortress in 31, and there's some like mechanics there. You can talk to the Lord, and he has a little bit of things to say to you. The rest can be. My ideal is that the structure of the game is very structured. There is dynamic content for when you're moving around the world, which this does really well. But for me, there needs to be some fixed content as well, some more rich, opinionated narrative about the world. So that part was a little bit of a bummer, for me at least. The second part is like you define your quest, and mine was like go help people in the world of Avalon. It's great that it allows you for some storytelling, but I would have preferred, and maybe one of the crowdfunding goals is there were a few opinionated quests. Um, I don't know what that's going to look like, but for me, it would be really cool to have like some structure. Like give me, I mean, it's fine for me to define my own quest, but maybe as I'm starting out as a new player, Maeve maybe has a very particular quest that Maeve wants to do, like go to, land on the Horns of South and go to Area 25 and find a thing there. And that's like her arc for her story, and it's a little bit more structured. Maybe there's something in 25 again that relates to Maeve, just something to drive me forward. Like I felt like I was a little bit just kind of aimless with like my big quest of helping people. And again, it put more onus back on me to come up with my story. or come up with the world and what's happening in the world. So, and then of course, as I mentioned, the face cards being a bit generic, it didn't always feel like they fit the environment. Doesn't matter where you are, the face card only responds to the weirdness level. So again, I really like that the numbered cards were specific to different regions. I feel like this book is already really rich and has a huge amount of content. But I feel like, if there was just like one extra table for each of these environments that had some custom events with some mechanical impacts that occurred in each region based on the face cards or something, that would do a lot for me. I personally don't mind it, but I've heard some people say that the fact that it's tarot cards, that it doesn't have like custom maps for each of these areas, is a little bit of a drawback. Like, this is pretty vague that this area here represents this area 31. Like, I could imagine a fold out map that has even tarot sized spaces of cards that you're moving across and that you're flipping over the tarot cards for the events. That might be one thing, but this is a little bit abstract for some people in terms of laying out the map area. For me, it wasn't that big of a deal. But yeah, so overall, I would say that this is one of the most successful experiences I've had with actual solo role playing, where I'm telling my own story, trying to interpret events and things like that, which I think is the essence of a lot of solo role playing. This game had way more structure than I'm used to in these solo role playing games. It had a very opinionated world. Um, I just wish it had leaned in a little bit more to the opinionated content here, things to discover, events that can happen that bring specific flavor and even mechanical effects. I think again the face cards do a little bit of that, and it's really awesome. There's like a mist fair that I ran across, or things like that. But there's only a few, and they're generic to any location. Uh, there's so much work put into these prompt tables for events that are custom, and that's so cool. But that's just one part of it for me. I would appreciate a little bit more structure on the mechanical side. Also, combat is a little bit take it or leave it for me. I mean, it can be a little bit intense, but it's really basic. It's just kind of like attack and defense. There are some specific uh, like powers that certain things have. It's cool stuff. I like there's a whole setback system if you have failures, that creates setbacks. I thought that was really cool. And honestly, I'm not a big like tactical combat person. I'm here for the storytelling. I'm here for the narrative. So I want combat to be thematic and really narrative, or get the heck out of the way. So I'm fine that it was a little bit straightforward in that. So yeah, overall, I had a really great experience. I'm really hoping to come back to this later on when I get the full Kickstarter. Um, and I hope it was somewhat enjoyable to watch. I'm probably going to try to move on from this to maybe a little bit more structured experiences. I have some board games in the queue. I mean, this is really tempting me to go back to Tainted Grail. I'm in the middle of Tainted Grail Kings of Ruin at the moment. But I just got a whole slew of updates for Agamonia, which is probably the only dungeon crawler that I enjoy and play, because it has a large amount of narrative, and in addition to the tactical combat. I've got a couple other games on my queue. So this has been really nice for me to like record little videos that are 20 minutes long with a little segment that's very narrative. That's what I'd like this channel to be, is me focusing on just sort of bringing storytelling to a lot of these tabletop games. So I need to think about how to do that with like a bigger campaign game, where I don't think it's as interesting to just watch me push around a character for 20 minutes. But anyway, I'll put some thought into that. But I think that's going to close it for Tainted Grail, the Journey in Avalon solo RPG. And as a reminder, as I said at the start, this is PDF. This is early version. A lot of stuff could change by the time the game finally hits our hands. But hopefully this was enjoyable. See you all later.